There was a pot on the back of my mother's stove that I never once saw empty. Not in all my growing up years. It was a big black iron thing with a dent in one side, and it sat on the back left burner over the lowest flame. And it was always going. Morning, noon, and night. Summer and winter. I was near grown before it ever occurred to me that other people's stoves did not have one. We were 7 at that table. My mother and father, my grandmother who lived with us, and 4 children. 7 mouths on a farm in the Oklahoma panhandle, in years when money was a thing you saw rarely and held tight when you did. And I will tell you plain, we never went hungry. Not once. And the reason, more than any single thing, was that pot that never went out. Now I want you to sit with this. There is a way of feeding a family that we have very nearly forgotten, where nothing was ever thrown away, because nothing could be, where 1 cut of meat fed 7 people for a week and then fed them again as something else. It was not a recipe. It was a whole way of thinking, and my mother had it in her hands, the way some folks have music in theirs. I am Earl Dean. Today, I'm going to tell you about my mother's pot. Sit with me a while. One thing before I begin, there is far more of this old know-how than fits in any one video, so I gathered the whole of it into a book at my website, earldeanbook.com, for the folks who want the long version. 99 methods, all in one place. I will not mention it again. If you want it, you know where to look. Now, the pot. Let me tell you first what was in it, because folks always ask, and the truth is, the answer changed every single day, and that was the whole genius of it. It started always with a bone. After a Sunday chicken, the carcass went into the pot. After a ham, the bone went in. My mother never let a bone leave that kitchen without it had given up every last thing it had to give. She would cover it with water and set it over that low flame, and it would murmur away for hours, all day, pulling the goodness out of the bone and into the broth. And that broth was the foundation of everything. Into it went the things that most folks throw in the bin, the tops of the celery, the peelings and ends of the onions, the outer leaves of the cabbage, the water she had boiled the potatoes in, a carrot gone a little soft, the little bit of vegetable left on a plate that a child did not finish. All of it went into the pot, and all of it became flavor, became nourishment, became supper. She was not making garbage soup. She was catching, in that one pot, every scrap of goodness that would otherwise have been lost, and turning it back into food. And here is the thing that made it a forever pot. It never started over. Each day she would take what was needed for that day's meal, and then she would add to it again. More water, the day's new scraps, a fresh bone when one came. The pot was never emptied and never begun again. It just went on and on. The way of fire is never the same flames, but is always the same fire. The soup we ate in February had a little of January still in it. There was a continuity to it, a thread that ran right through the whole cold season, and I have come to think there was something almost holy in that, though my mother would have laughed to hear me say so. To her, it was just sense. Now let me tell you the safe way of it, because I would not have you do a thing wrong on my account. My mother kept that pot going on the back of a wood stove that was never truly cold, and in a cold farmhouse kitchen, and she brought it up to a hard boil every single day, without fail. That daily boil is what kept it safe. If you would keep a pot like this today, you do it right. You cool it, and keep it in the icebox between times, or you bring it to a full rolling boil each day, and you use good sense, and you do not let it sit warm and forgotten. The old way worked because it was tended every day. An untended pot is a danger, not a thrift. Tend it, and it is one of the oldest safe ways there is to feed a family. But the pot was only half of it. The other half was the meat, and how my mother made one piece of it last a week, and that That was a kind of arithmetic I have never seen bettered. Here is the thing you have to understand, and it is the very heart of how the old folks ate. The meat was never the meal. We think of it backwards now. We put a great slab of meat in the center of the plate and arrange a little something around it. My mother did the opposite. The meat was the seasoning. It was the thing that made the rest taste of something. And a little, used that way, goes a very long way. Say it was a chicken on a Sunday. That was the one day the meat was the meal, near enough. And even then she carved it careful so that every person got a fair share, and the choice bits went to my father, who worked the hardest, and to my grandmother, who was old. That was Sunday. But that chicken was not finished on Sunday, not by a long way. Before I go on, let me pause a moment. Every home has its leaks. The food going to waste is the great one. The half a chicken scraped into the bin, the bone tossed, the good fat poured away. But there is also the heat slipping out the cracks, the water, the electric, the things that break and get bought twice. In my savings manual, I walk you through finding and fixing every one of them, 99 methods, the old way, with your own 2 hands. The link is down in the description. Now, back to that chicken. Monday, the picked-over carcass went into the forever pot, and every shred of meat still clinging to it was pulled off first and set aside. That night, those shreds of chicken, not much, a cupful maybe, were stirred through a great pot of dumplings, or noodles, or rice, and that fed all 7 of us, because the dish was mostly dumpling, and the chicken was only there to make it taste of chicken. 1 cup full, flavoring a meal for 7. Tuesday, the broth that bone had been making in the pot all the day Monday became a soup, thick with barley and whatever vegetable we had. And again, it tasted of that Sunday chicken, though there was hardly a bit of the bird left in it by then. Just the memory of it, cooked into the broth, and on it went. The fat that rose and set on top of the broth, my mother skimmed and saved, and it greased the pan for the cornbread, or fried the potatoes. The very last of it, when there was nothing left but the bone gone soft. Even that she would crack for the marrow inside. 1 chicken, a whole week, and then the bone, finally spent, went out to the dog, who I suppose got the very last of the goodness none of us could reach. That was the way with every cut. A ham at Christmas was sliced thin for the day, and then the bone flavored a pot of beans for days after, and the little scraps went into a hash, and the fat was rendered and saved. A piece of beef, too dear to eat as itself most weeks, was browned and stretched through a great pot of stew, where the potatoes and the carrots and the barley did the filling, and the beef did the flavoring. My mother could take a single cut of meat that a family today would eat in one sitting, and she could walk it across a whole week of suppers, and every one of those suppers was hot and filling and tasted of something good. And here is what I have come to understand, looking back, that I did not understand as a boy. It was not that we were going without. That is the part I most want you to hear. I did not grow up feeling poor at that table. I grew up feeling fed. The soup was good. The dumplings were good. The bread was warm, and there was always enough. My mother performed a kind of quiet miracle 3 times a day, turning almost nothing into enough, and she did it so steady, and so without complaint, that her children never knew it was hard. We thought that was just how supper came to be. It was years before I understood that what I had been watching was one of the great arts, practiced by a woman who would never in her life have called herself an artist. Nothing was thrown away, because nothing could be. That is the plain truth of it. There was no bin of scraped plates in our kitchen, because the scraps were tomorrow's broth. There was no spoiled leftover, because there were no leftovers. Only the next day's ingredient. A thing was used, and then it was used again, and then the last of it was used a third way, and only when it had given up every possible bit of good did it finally leave the house. And even then, it went to the dog, or the garden, not the trash. My mother ran that kitchen with no waste at all, none, and she fed 7 people doing it. Now let me be honest with you, the way I always am, because I will not sell you a false picture, even a sweet one. This took work. It took my mother's time, hours of it, every day, tending that pot, planning that week of meals from one cut of meat, using her hands and her head from before dawn until after we were abed. It is easy to make it sound like magic. And there was magic in the result. But the magic was made of labor and care and attention, day after day after day. I will not pretend it was effortless. The reason we have let this go is partly that we are sold things to save us the trouble, and the trouble is real. But I will tell you this too. There was a dignity in that labor, and a security in it, that I am not sure we got a fair trade for when we swapped it away. My mother knew every single day that she could feed her family no matter what the world did, because she did not need much from it. That is a kind of wealth the bank does not measure, and here is why nobody teaches this anymore. There is no money in a pot that never goes out. There is no money in teaching a woman to stretch one chicken across a week, or to make soup from the scraps she was about to throw away. There is a great deal of money in selling that same family 7 separate suppers in 7 boxes. The Forever Pot does not sell anything. It only saves. So it faded out of the kitchens of America, not because it stopped working. It never stopped working, but because nobody could make a dollar reminding you of it. That is not a conspiracy, mind. It is simpler and sadder than that. So I am reminding you. That is the whole reason I sat down to make this. So here is what I want you to do this week, and it is a small thing. The way I always ask a small thing. The next time you cook a chicken, do not throw the bones away. Put them in a pot, cover them with water, throw in the onion ends and the celery tops you would have binned, and let it murmur on the stove for a few hours. Then strain it, and you will have a broth richer than anything you ever bought in a carton, made entirely from what you were about to throw out. Start there, just the broth. And the next time you fry a supper, save the drippings in a jar by the stove, and do it where your children can see you do it. Let them ask what you are doing with those bones. Tell them about a woman they never met, who fed 7 people on almost nothing, and never let her pot go out. Because that, more than any video or any book, is how this comes back. My mother learned it watching her mother. I learned it watching mine. It only dies if we stop letting the young ones watch. Tell me in the comments, did your mother or your grandmother have a pot like that, or a way of stretching a Sunday roast clear across the week? What was the meal she made out of almost nothing that you would give anything to taste one more time? Those memories are exactly the kind of thing that slips away when nobody writes it down. I read every single one, and I will tell you true, they are my favorite thing about this whole undertaking. Next time, since we have been speaking of my mother's kitchen, I'm going to show you the bread she baked. The plain daily loaf that cost almost nothing and went beside that soup at every meal. And the trick she had for never letting a stale heel of it go to waste. It is the natural next step after today. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Keep the simple things close. They were never half so foolish as they looked. I am Earl Dean. I will see you next time.